It all started on what should have been just another quiet Saturday morning. The kind of morning where you sip your coffee on the porch and watch your wife carry a few work boxes inside. Nothing special, nothing dramatic. But within 10 minutes, the entire neighborhood was standing in my yard. The HOA president was screaming like my wife was smuggling nuclear weapons. And by the end of it, a sheriff's salute would flip the entire power dynamic of our street upside down. That was the moment everything changed. When Karen went dead silent. When the truth started bleeding out. And when I realized the boxes in my wife's hands could destroy 3 years of carefully hidden corruption. We had just moved into Brookstone Hills, barely 3 weeks in. And I'll admit, at first glance, the place looked like a dream. Clean sidewalks, trimmed lawns, people who waved when you walked by. The HOA seemed calm, even friendly, which was refreshing after all the horror stories I'd read online. But there's always one person who ruins the picture. The one who can't live without power. Her name was Valerie Grant, the HOA president. She wore the title like a badge and strutted around like the sheriff of suburbia. I thought she was just another busybody at first, until that morning when my wife, Claire, hauled in her third box of VA files and Valerie exploded across the lawn.
"You can't bring those here! Those are classified!" she shrieked, voice cracking like a siren.
Her face was beet red, her hands trembling as she jabbed her finger at the cardboard like Claire was unloading a bomb. I nearly dropped my mug, sitting there dumbstruck, watching a grown woman melt down in broad daylight. Claire, steady as ever, replied calmly, "Ma'am, I'm authorized to review these. I process death benefit claims for veterans' families. This is just paperwork." But Valerie wasn't listening. She spun in circles, muttering about federal crimes, saying she'd call the FBI, her eyes darting not at Claire, but at the labels on those boxes. And it hit me. She wasn't outraged. She was terrified. Neighbors froze mid-task. Mrs. Benson's watering can went limp. The kids stopped their basketball game. Curtains rippled across the street. Phones came out. Whispers carried. And there was Valerie, screaming about espionage, while my wife carried binders and files into her own home. It would have been funny if it wasn't so insane. That's when Harold King arrived, our HOA treasurer, but also a reserve deputy with military service, the kind of guy who speaks softly but can level a room with authority. He looked at Valerie, then at Claire, then at the boxes, and asked evenly, "What exactly is going on here?" Claire showed him her credentials, Federal Employee ID, clearance, the whole package, and Harold's face barely moved. But I caught the flicker of recognition. Valerie's face, though, drained of color like someone had cut the power. When Claire mentioned death benefits, Valerie staggered back like the words were bullets. That was the first time I thought, this woman's hiding something rotten. Valerie slunk off, muttering excuses about security concerns. But she'd already accused my wife of federal crimes in front of half the neighborhood. I stepped closer to Claire, adrenaline buzzing, and demanded Valerie explain herself. She couldn't. And as Harold quietly warned me to keep an eye on things, I knew deep down this wasn't paranoia. Something bigger was brewing. That night, Claire mentioned a case file she'd been assigned. A soldier named Daniel Grant who died in a training accident 3 years ago. His widow collected the payout unusually fast, despite some glaring inconsistencies. The name hit me like a freight train. Grant, as in Valerie Grant, the HOA president who'd just lost her mind over those very files. Claire didn't know the connection yet, but I did. Suddenly, Every cracked note in Valerie's voice, every twitch of her hands when she saw those labels, made perfect sense. She wasn't scared of paperwork. She was scared of exposure. Over the next few days, Harold and I pieced things together over coffee at my kitchen table. He brought HOA ledgers. Years of landscaping invoices tripled the market rate, all signed off solely by Valerie. The overpayments started exactly when her husband died. 3 years of embezzlement stacked neatly alongside a suspiciously fast $300,000 insurance payout. My wife dug deeper into Daniel's VA file and found red flags everywhere. Therapy records vanished. Timelines altered. A dismissal letter claiming he'd refused treatment, even though his commander had praised his progress. Fraud screamed from every page. But while we were connecting dots, Valerie doubled down. Suddenly, our mailbox filled with violation notices, $100 fines for a trash bin, $200 for Claire's government, issue parking decal. Harold got slapped for flying a small flag in his yard. Mrs. Benson was fined for planting flowers by her mailbox. It was transparent harassment, a desperate attempt to crush anyone asking questions, and it worked on me, at least for a while. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, violation letters piled high, feeling crushed under the weight of it all. Maybe she was right. Maybe we were poking where we shouldn't. Maybe moving here was a mistake. For a brief, miserable moment, I thought of just paying, keeping my head down, letting it go. I hated myself for even thinking it. But the exhaustion was real. I didn't want to drag Claire deeper into this mess, not when she already carried the weight of military families on her shoulders. But then Claire touched my hand, steady as always, and said, "This isn't about us. This is about the truth, and Valerie knows it." That was the moment I snapped out of it. I wasn't just some homeowner getting nickel and dimed by HOA fines. I was standing between my wife and a corrupt tyrant who thought she could bully everyone into silence. That protective instinct roared back, and I decided I wasn't bowing down. The neighborhood rallied, too. Harold organized a meeting. Veterans' families compared notes. And that's when Daniel's sister, Maria, called from Arizona. She'd found letters from him, letters full of hope, talking about therapy progress and plans for the future. Her brother had been improving, not spiraling. The insurance claim was a lie. That was the smoking gun. And almost on cue, federal SUVs rolled onto our street one morning, agents swarming Valerie's house while neighbors peeked from windows and pretended to fetch mail. They carried out boxes of forged documents, drafts of Daniel's signature, even gambling receipts that explained where all the money went. Valerie wasn't just corrupt. She was drowning in debt, feeding an addiction with stolen funds. But she wasn't finished. Days later, my security camera pinged at 2:30 a.m. There she was, creeping across my yard in wrinkled clothes, clutching a crowbar. When Harold pulled up in his patrol car, the lights splashing across her face, she froze like a deer, caught with stolen files scattered at her feet. She babbled about retrieving her property. But we all knew the truth. She was trying to destroy evidence. That break unsealed it. Federal charges piled up, and Valerie was cornered. Yet somehow she still believed she could scheme her way out. So we set the trap, with Harold's connections and Maria's cooperation. We fed her a story. The investigation was being dropped for lack of evidence. She just needed to sign some closure forms, and she'd get her last HOA paycheck, $3,000. Just enough bait. Valerie took it. Hook, line, sinker. She showed up at the bank parking lot, smug as ever. signing every page Claire slid in front of her, not realizing each one was a confession. Her handwriting matched the forgeries. Her signatures sealed her fate. I watched from across the street, heart pounding, as Harold stepped forward with the final envelope. And then federal agents moved in. Valerie's face when she realized what she'd signed, I'll never forget it. She screamed about entrapment, clawed at the papers. But the evidence was ironclad. And when Maria confronted her, asking through tears if she'd destroyed Daniel's therapy records, Valerie snapped. He was going to leave me. I deserved that money more than he deserved a second chance. The words hung heavy in the air, sickening, undeniable. Every neighbor within earshot knew exactly who she was in that moment. Not a leader, not a protector, but a parasite who profited from a soldier's death. The agents cuffed her right there, reading off charges like a grocery list: insurance fraud, mail fraud, forgery, embezzlement. Neighbors filmed, whispers rising. But no one stepped forward to defend her. She'd lost everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom. As they led her away, her eyes darted around desperately, searching for someone to believe her story. But the street was silent except for the shuffle of her own feet in chains. For once, the queen of our HOA had no audience, no control, nothing left but the consequences she'd spent 3 years outrunning. I stood there gripping Claire's hand, feeling the weight of relief more than triumph. Valerie had tried to break us with false accusations, tried to bury the truth under fines and fear. But in the end, she'd destroyed herself. She thought she was invincible. But the second Harold saluted my wife, the second the truth touched daylight, she was finished. That silence of hers, that stunned, pale silence, was the moment she lost. Everything after was just the collapse. And if there's one thing I'll never forget from this nightmare, it's this: power built on lies will always crack the loudest when the truth shows up at your doorstep. That's the lesson I carry, and it's the lesson I'll leave with you now. From HOA Drama Unfolded.